And we've chosen this date for this webinar. On one hand, to try and restart a series which we've been doing for a few months last year in the first instance, and to also recognize that today is Earth Day. And the theme for today's Earth Day is to restore our Earth, which focuses on, among other things, in addition to natural processes, it focuses on emerging technologies that can restore the world's ecosystems. And as a result of that, we're going to talk a little bit today about one of the initiatives that has been ongoing in the Caribbean for a couple of years, and to speak of some of the results from that work, and specifically what it hopefully will lead to in Jamaica as well as much of the rest of the Caribbean. So thank you for joining us. We have 3 speakers today, and we're going to also allow some time for question and answers. And I'm going to introduce each of the speakers just before I give them the floor. Our first speaker is Ms. Loretto Duffy-Mayers, and she's a senior consultant. She's also a project manager, project specialist, an energy consultant, a tourism specialist, and an environmental specialist. And as you're going to be able to tell from her accent, even though she's been in the region for a long time, she was born in Dublin, Ireland, and is both a European and a CARICOM citizen. She was educated at the University College Dublin and the UK Institute of Marketing, and she's worked for the past 30 years in the area of sustainable development, focusing primarily on tourism, energy, and gender, and has won several awards in these fields. She's organized and presented at many workshops and conferences focused on tourism and energy, and she's conducted walkthroughs and surveys in energy efficiency in over 120 hotels in the Caribbean, as well as market assessments on energy efficiency and renewable energy in the region. She's one of the people who actually led the Caribbean Cooling Initiative, which is the focus of our webinar today. And this initiative, which you're going to hear from others, was developed by UNEP to assist the governments in the region to transition to more energy efficient and climate friendly air conditioning and refrigeration. Prior to being involved in the Seacool project, she was a regional project manager for the Caribbean Hotel Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Action Program, or CHENAC, as many of us know it, which actually won an award for the best energy efficiency program in the Caribbean. And she's also held other positions as environmental manager for several award-winning green hotels, and has received many awards, including Barbados Youth Environmental Program Award for contribution to the environment, the Barbados Governor General's Award, the Green Globe Champion, Barbados Minister of Environment Award, and the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association Environmental Award. So I'm sorry to cut into her time by giving you a long bio, but I think it's important to recognize that Loretto has been giving yeoman service to the region, and a reputation that's spread well beyond the shores of Barbados. So we're very fortunate to have her on this panel, and I'd like to introduce and welcome Loretto to the floor. The floor is yours, Loretto.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my video? Or you're looking at?
Okay, good.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Excellent. Again, good afternoon, all, I should say, and a very happy Earth Day to everyone. Sorry, I'm just getting messages here to say that my network, I'm getting issues. So, okay. Yes, the Caribbean Cooling Initiative, it is certainly a very appropriate conversation to be having on Earth Day. This project started in, I believe, 2017. It started in the region in 2018 and was expected to have finished by the end of 2019. It did initially, obviously it was, yes, you can change the slide, please. Thank you. 5 countries were initially the part of the Seacool: the Bahamas, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, St. Lucia, and Barbados. Now, I have Grenada marked on the map because we did actually co-opt Grenada into a lot of the the components of the project, because Grenada on their own were actually doing a significant amount of work, which was very similar to what we were doing at Seacool. Next slide, please. So yes, as I said, the project started 2018 and was to have been finished and completed and done and dusted by the end of 2019. But here we are in 2021, and while the project itself has officially ended, we are actually still doing a lot of work that we had started. We never wanted the momentum to actually end. And so our consultants are still actively involved in their own countries. Now, the objective of the Seacool was to assist the countries of the Caribbean to accelerate the market transition to energy efficient and climate friendly cooling solutions. We obviously recognized that equipment is obviously around it by the manufacturers of the energy equipment have been looking to improve their standards, and obviously it is important for us to try to keep up with what they are doing in order for us to be able to get the benefits of the cost effectiveness, etc. But we also recognize that we have got to improve on our energy efficiency, and we also have to look at the gases we are using, because we've got to ensure that we reduce our own emissions and that we are able to take advantage of the excuse me, that we are able to take advantage of all of the new equipment and the new technology that's out there. Now, the Seacool project, basically there was 5 components in the Seacool project, one of which was a national cooling strategy. Secondly, a capacity building, a financial mechanism. We're looking at green climate fund related opportunities, and communications and outreach. Now, in order to develop a national cooling strategy, which I might say had not been done before anywhere except under the this particular project. Now, we had to obviously examine the overall framing of cooling in each of the countries, and that required a lot of background work. We had to conduct a market assessment of what exactly is on the market in the individual islands, and that I can tell you was an extremely difficult undertaking, because as you would all be aware, we don't really like to share information in the Caribbean the way we should. And, apart from doing surveys, which are, I think at this point in time, most people are actually surveyed out. There's a tremendous survey fatigue in the region. People are reluctant to answer questions, and therefore the consultants were in a position where they ended up having to do an awful lot of legwork to actually go to places to find out what is actually on the market. A lot of the time we've discovered that there are certain businesses, such as hotels, etc., who seem to bypass local suppliers and go directly to suppliers, maybe in Miami. They may go to a Best Buy, they oftentimes order directly from somebody in Italy because somebody has told them that that guy was a good guy. So it was a very difficult undertaking, but with the information that we did manage to glean, we were able to put together some information on what is available to the islands, where we are getting the supplies from, and basically what brands, what models, etc., were on the market. We also presented to the governments the KSEP model regulations, and basically the idea of the model regulations was that we would try to up our standards in order to be able to meet the standards of what is being done in the manufacturing countries. We shared our recommendations with all of the stakeholders. Again, as we are all aware, in the Caribbean, sometimes it's very difficult to get feedback from our stakeholders. It takes a long time to get feedback from our stakeholders. So therefore, we had a lot of prodding and begging to do to try and get the feedback that we needed to in order to move forward with our national cooling strategies. And then we identified the path forward to refine and adopt these national cooling strategies to be accepted by governments. Now, as I said, the reason why we are still working with the project is that because a lot of the governments have not yet accepted the cooling strategies, they are still sharing them, they are still refining them, and we are still assisting in order to try and get them to a point where they can be sent to cabinet. We obviously, as I said, we looked at capacity building because a lot of work needed to be done with the those people who were actually training technicians, and I will speak a lot about that in a little while. A financial mechanism. We worked with our colleagues at BASE in Switzerland to come up with a financial mechanism which would enable people to actually do cooling as a service, and not only to be able to go out there and actually buy equipment. We also looked at the related opportunities such as the Green Climate Fund, where countries might be able to access funding in order to be able to progress with the programme. And then obviously a communications and outreach programme, which obviously is absolutely essential. Next slide, please. So why is SeaCool so important to this region? Well, as Vincent said, in a lot of ways, we are preaching to the choir here. We are fully aware that the Caribbean is the most tourism dependent region in the world, and we face serious competition, in particular from the ASEAN countries, who are already very technologically advanced in the sense that a lot of the manufacturers are from that region already. We have some of the highest energy costs in the world, and that doesn't seem to be changing very quickly. We are among the most impacted by climate change, but we do not in any ourselves contribute to global warming. I think also we are fully aware that COVID-19 has showed us the importance of refrigeration. The SeaCool project looked at both, cooling in both air conditioning and refrigeration. Refrigeration probably, 2 years ago was not getting the attention it is now, as we have recognized the absolute importance of refrigeration when it comes to being able to preserve vaccines. And this is now a global issue, not just for us. I think La Soufrière has also thrown up some other issues in that since for the past 2 weeks, with the amount of ash that has fallen, in particular on us in Barbados, well, apart from poor St. Vincent, but in Barbados, we have not air conditioning units, for the simple reason that we have been warned over and over and over again that ash will destroy the mechanisms in the air conditioners. And this is something that we obviously are going to have to speak to suppliers about, because this is not just a Caribbean problem. We have now realized that the ash from Soufrière has reached India. So it has gone across 3 continents at this point in time. And of course, we have to take into account that our individual countries have set very high standards. David will be talking obviously about Jamaica has looking at 50% renewable by 2030, whereas Barbados is looking at 100% by 2030, 100% emission free by 2030 also. So we have a very, very high aspirations. Next slide, please. Our national cooling strategy. I'm going to run very briefly through these slides because I'm not going to talk about everything because they will be made available to you. But the national cooling strategy, which was really the culmination of all the work we did, we looked at the purpose of cooling and why it mattered. We brought into the context all of international treaties, the policies and programs that each country is involved in. We looked at the energy targets. We looked at the infrastructure, supply and demand. And as of the cooling market overview, which was basically our market assessment, we made all our recommendations to the individual governments. And we also included, obviously, the MEPs and labels, which the U4E have recommended that the countries should adopt. Next slide. The recommendations, obviously, we have looked at, enhancing the building energy codes, cold chain enhancements. I am so glad that we actually spent so much time looking at cold chain. It was something that has proven to be incredibly important to us, especially now in the COVID times, that we have good quality cold chains, not only for food, but also for our medicines and vaccines at this point. Training and capacity building, outreach and communications. We went through all of these things. The important things are to try to get our cooling strategies included in the NDCs, because that is where we realize that we will really make the difference. Next slide. The main areas of capacity building that we actually looked at was cooling as a service, which is a mechanism by which a company or a building or a hotel can go to a supplier and ask them to supply cool air. Something similar to the old Xerox machines where you purchased the printed page as opposed to purchasing the actual Xerox machine. Now there are facilities for where people can actually ask a supplier to put in the supply us with cool air, and we pay for the cool air. So that is one of the services that was rolled out as part of this project. We also had our twinning workshops for staff, for the Caribbean staff, and we were participated in the global twinning workshops. We had a product registration workshop for the Sea Cool countries and Grenada in Barbados. We had the HVAC training for the Sea Cool countries and Grenada. And again, that was done in Grenada, and we invited all of the training institutes in the countries. As I've mentioned, the Sea Cool or the CAS already, and I will leave you to have a look over that slide yourselves afterwards, but it is an interesting service, and I believe some of the practically all of the suppliers at this point in time that are affiliated with UN have taken on this service. This is just as a photograph to show the twinning workshops, one of which was held in Quito in October 2018 for the Caribbean countries, where we twinned the energy officers and the ozone officers in each of the Caribbean countries. Now, the reason for this was that the energy officers and the ozone officers oftentimes were working on pretty similar issues, but were not aware of what the other was doing, because one is based in the Ministry of the Environment and the other was based in the Ministry of Energy. So we brought them together. We had very, very interesting discussions. We also had a meeting in Paris in February 2019, where we had all of the regions together, and that was where everybody was able to share their issues, and very, very interesting meetings, and incredibly important for capacity building in the region. Our product registration system workshop was very successful, and again in Barbados, 2 experts from the Sea Cool countries plus Grenada, plus we had the Caribbean Institute for Caribbean Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, which is CROSSQ, which is the organization which is responsible for standards in the region. And we looked at the possibility of setting up a product registration system whereby customs would be in a better position to be able to gather information on what actual refrigeration and air conditioning products are coming into the countries. Next slide, please. The HVAC Training Institute Regional Consortium in Grenada. Again, the experts from the training institutes in each of the Sea Cool countries were invited to this, and we had a very, very interesting workshop on the new types of air conditioning units and the new gases that are being used. Grenada, which has been for a long time, has been way ahead of everybody else in terms of adapting to the new technologies, and in particular the new gases. Gave us a very, very interesting tours of the community college, where they have their own workshop there, and where they have installed the new ACs, which you can see there in the picture. Next slide, please. The main components, again, this is just a breakdown of the main components of the Sea Cool. Conducted 5 national cooling market assessments, as I said, the cooling strategies, recommended the MEPs and labels, developed a financial mechanism, provided capacity building. Currently, we have 5 cooling strategy drafts in process. They're in the final refinement stage. One of the NDC's update has been published by DR, and it references the NCS recommendations. We have 2 NDC 2020 update drafts in Barbados and St. Lucia. We have 1 multi-working group stakeholder consultation process in Jamaica, which David will speak about. 1 national cooling strategy revised draft has been presented to Barbados, and several suppliers have made CAS financial mechanism commercially available. I think you can skip the next slide, and we can go, yes, to the UFRI website has been updated, where you can find an absolute multitude of information, which is very, very valuable to anybody interested in the cooling and refrigeration sectors. I can leave you all to peruse that. The web address is there for you. The next slide. I just wanted to say, a great thanks to the project team, the coordination group, which was Brian Holly, myself, and Marco, which was the coordination team based in Paris, the regional team, Vincent and Alex in Jamaica, and Roberto and Marco out of the Panama office, our friends at base in Switzerland, and then our colleagues also at Berkeley in California. The next slide, please. None of it would have been possible without the Caribbean team. Myself, David, Latoya in Bahamas, Sylvester in St. Lucia. We have Ivan Delgado in the Dominican Republic. And I have to also mention our colleague who departed us, unfortunately, during the program. A great friend, unfortunately, died unexpectedly, we really did have a very good team, and as I said, the team are still working even though the project has actually ended, and we will stay working on it until we see that our national cooling strategies have been accepted by our governments. It's very important, and I think we recognize that, especially on Earth Day, and especially in view of what the Caribbean has been experiencing over the last year and, well, for the last 15 months, I think we are recognizing the importance of this program even more and more. So I would just like to say, last slide, please. Thank you for your attention. Our contact details are there should anybody wish to get in touch with us. And I do hope you all have a wonderful Earth Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Loretto. Very comprehensive introduction. I know you're going to get more specific details in the next 2 presentations on the Jamaica context. One observation that in this field we tend to use a lot of acronyms, and I hope that others are familiar with all the acronyms that are being used. But if not, then please in the chat you can raise your questions if it's about anything to do with the presentations, or even share your views on what might be the next steps for all of us as we try to move forward and build upon the work that's already been done. Our next presenter is Mr. David Barrett, and he's a senior consultant in the energy, environment, and mining sectors. He has academic qualifications to the master's level in both energy and environment, as well as botany and zoology. And he currently serves as principal consultant with NBAR Consulting since 2010. He has represented other firms as well, and was the energy policy advisor for the USAID Caribbean Clean Energy Program. He's also worked for the United Nations Environment Program, which is why he's on this call, as well as UNDP, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Global Environment Facility, as well as the European Union. He is founding director and past president of the Jamaica Solar Energy Association, and active in the private sector organization of Jamaica, the Consumer Advocacy Committee on Utilities, and the Jamaica Institute of Environmental Professionals. So we'd like to welcome David to the floor, and he's going to tell us a bit more about how the SEQUEL project has manifested itself in Jamaica. Over to you, David.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vincent, and thanks to UNEP for this opportunity to present a little bit on the work that we're doing. definitely want to say to everyone, happy Earth Day also. And excellent presentation by Loretta, which really sets the platform for where we're going to go. So could everyone just confirm that you are seeing the presentation at this time?
We're seeing it.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so this is the path we're going to follow, just looking at a little bit of the team, focusing on the things that make the cooling strategy important for Jamaica, the path that we took to get to the point where we are now, and then we'll just close with a summary. Loretta has already spoken to the persons who are part of the teams, whether regional or local project based, and the experts among us. So it's very important to begin by appreciating that efficient cooling for Jamaica is part of why we would have pursued this particular project. We actually have linkages in terms of things that we want to achieve even before C-Cool came about. So we have our national energy policy, our Vision 2030, national development plan. We have a national energy conservation and efficiency policy. And there is a code of practice for the RAC, refrigeration and air conditioning sector. So we already have this base that gives us a significant interest in energy efficient cooling. Then from the atmospheric or environmental dimension, we also have significant interest and linkages because our national climate change framework sets in place pathways for the management of ozone depleting substances. But we go beyond that because our nationally determined contributions as it pertains to climate change also looks at how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and how we can reduce the amount of substances that we use, which eventually cause high global warming as we are experiencing now. And then we have, we are seeking now to ratify the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which has to do with the ozone layer. But the Kigali now ties in the two things. One that I mentioned, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. The other one having to do with protecting the ozone layer. So the Kigali Amendment facilitates that, and Jamaica wants to follow that pathway. We also have in our third national communication to UNFCCC a recognition that greenhouse emission impacts do come from refrigerants. And so this is also an opportunity for us to make the change. And so we have already reduced, closed out the CFCs, those chemicals which were used for refrigeration. We have significantly brought down or almost removed the importation of the HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, which are another group of chemicals used for refrigeration and foam and so on. And under the Kigali Amendment, the initiative then is to move from even the HCFCs and to reduce the amount of HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, that we still use for refrigeration. And you'll see the reason for mentioning all those. So why are we looking at refrigeration and air conditioning? The United for Efficiency did a country assessment, and in that country assessment, it was realized that if Jamaica was just to follow minimum energy performance standards, the MEPS, we would potentially save ourselves about 340 gigawatt hours of electricity by 2030. We would be able to avoid the installation of new power plants in the order of about 60 megawatts. And we could reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we produce by over 360,000 tons. And that's, if you think of it, it's like moving 200,000 cars off the road, cars which are emitting emissions. Nationally also, we would see a reduction in our peak electricity demand, which tends to be, we have a peak during the day, but our higher peak is in the night. When people get home and relax and turn on their ACs, we'll be able to improve our national energy security because we're still importing almost 80% of our energy. And of course, we have the international commitments to the Kigali Amendment and others And for businesses, there's opportunity to reduce your electricity bill and therefore improve the business competitiveness, and also address things like corporate social responsibilities, and especially for the hotels, which Loretta is so intimate with. They have the opportunity to show a greener side of their whole activity and reduce their costs. So with all of that said, clearly we have a basis for pursuing a cooling strategy for Jamaica. And we launched in 2018, joining the Sea Cool initiative, as Loretta spoke about, and we received significant funding to carry out what we have done so far, the consulting work through the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, KSEP. And also we got expert support from BASE and from the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. Certainly want to say thanks to UNEP's Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, which has given us a lot of logistical support and even now is hosting this particular interaction we're having. So this is just a roadmap. I won't spend much time on it, just to say that a lot of activities have involved consultations, trainings, and the last one that we had was the interaction with the working groups, and I'll speak about that a little bit further. But suffice to say, at this point in time, the document called the Jamaica National Cooling Strategy has been handed over to the government entities for their application as an adopted strategy. Having said that, we had to do the market assessment, which Loretta also mentioned. In Jamaica, we have about 20 dealers or suppliers of different cooling solutions. It might be refrigerators, it might be air conditioners, and so on. And 15 companies are actually authorized to import approved refrigerants for cooling. And clearly that's on the legislation. We only have one industrial association for refrigeration and air conditioning, Java, and they have been around for quite a while and have made a significant impact in Jamaica. What do we have in Jamaica in terms of our products? Well, we have a wide band of cooling products. Large centralized air conditioners, split units are very popular for Jamaica. We have old package units. Some of those should fall off the windows. They are very old, but people like to keep their systems. Hopefully this cooling strategy will help them to release it under their budget. And of course, portable air conditioners have become a very interesting option for persons in apartments and who can't install systems in the building. When we look at refrigerants that are common in Jamaica, now there are many more than what you see now on the slide, but these are just some of the perhaps more popular ones. You can see the comments which I made earlier about global warming and ozone in terms of global warming potential in these substances or ozone depleting potential for these substances. So Jamaica is now at a place where the HFCs are more significant because the CFCs have been, we no longer utilize those. The HCFCs have come down. So here is a R404, for example, is a HCFC blend. You'll notice that the global warming potential is fairly high, and this is used in a lot of commercial systems. Then there's a 410, it's lower, it is a HCFC blend, but you will notice that once we start getting to hydrocarbons, carbon dioxide, which is a natural refrigerant, and ammonia, which is a natural refrigerant, we're really optimizing and hitting that maximum sweet spot that we want to obtain of having no impact on the global warming and no impact on ozone. There are many more, as I mentioned, but these are just some of the more popular ones. It's not possible to do a national cooling strategy without first speaking and having consultation and guidance from your stakeholders. And a lot of effort was placed in interacting not only with government sector, but private sector. So you will see there are a lot of ministries, education, finance, health, economic growth, tourism, and industry, and of course, energy in terms of science. But we also have our development agencies like UNEP, UNDP involved in those activities. We had the experts on board, and we had the U4E and the association on board. So we felt very wide consultations. We've had at least 3 main meetings where we were able to pull information and get guidance from these entities. However, one of the things that Jamaica had to do in particular was to develop a technical working group, because once the cooling strategy had reached a point where it was almost ready to submit, we believe, at least the stakeholders believed, it was important for us to drill down in depth in specific areas to ensure that whatever was recommended as a national strategy was actually implementable. So this would not become consultant work that was put on a shelf, but a document that was applicable in Jamaica, applicable to the laws and the policies. So for example, we had the policy regulation and enforcement working group, which drilled down to ensure that small things like waste disposal that sometimes, forgotten or omitted in many of these strategies was incorporated, to make sure that the legislation and the policies and the plans which were already in Jamaica could be strengthened and also harmonized so that they're not splintered. There's a standards and compliance working group that made sure that it drilled down into the nitty-gritty to confirm that weather bans could work, for example, whether restrictions were necessary or helpful, and to look at things like what Loretta spoke about, market monitoring, verification, information gathering, because it's very difficult in the Caribbean to get information. We like to keep our information private, and so data is sometimes quite limited. We also had a financial and fiscal mechanism working group, which looked at the possibility for receiving funding, for example, from cooling as a service, as a financing mechanism, or whether the government could potentially give some sort of financial support to developing efficient cooling market. And then we had an awareness and capacity development working group, which focused on things like ensuring that we had sustainability, that the experts in the field, the installers, the developers, the suppliers were kept abreast of new technology, that there was always a new generation that could carry forward whatever works were done, and to make sure that we had, for example, synergies in the cold chain program. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen how important it is to understand just how cold chain programs work, because by the time the vaccine is produced, it has to be kept at sub-zero temperatures, some of them even lower than others. And if that temperature changes, the vaccine is no longer useful. So it moves from the manufacturing, moves on a plane, gets into Jamaica, sits in a hospital before it gets injected in someone's arm. And every step along that chain has to be monitored, and cooling then becomes a critical component of success. And so we incorporate that for sure in the strategy. The strategy has the same layers. There's synergy and there's similarity in how all the strategies were laid out. So it's the same template as what Loretta spoke about. This is just our mock-up, as it were, of what the strategy cover will look like, and the government of Jamaica will make the final decision what that looks like. But for the time being, this is what we look at. So very quickly, I would just mention that we had 14 recommendations, which are specific, relevant, applicable, and implementable for Jamaica. The first one was the building energy codes, because we recognize that if the building code facilitated, encouraged, or mandated efficient cooling, right, and the use of refrigerants, which met the environmental requirements, then it's easier to do that at the start when new buildings are going up or when you're changing out, rather than to remove and retrofit. Recommendation 2 spoke about strengthening and harmonizing the legislation, policy standards, and labeling. And again, it's important for the consumer to know when they purchase a cooling device, a refrigerator, or an air conditioner, that they're actually meeting standards. and also for the regulators to be able to carry out their function of regulation and enforcement. There are many other things under these different recommendations that I won't mention all of them, but just giving you a sampling of what they incorporate. So recommendation 3 spoke about market monitoring. Again, it's hard to get information, but certainly if there was a repository for such information, it would be much easier for the government, Jamaicans, and the sector, the business sector, RAC, to be able to carry out the functions that are necessary to verify how much refrigerants we're bringing in, what types, and to enforce. But it's not all about refrigerants, because alternative cooling now means that you can actually cool a building without use of refrigerants. So for example, seawater air conditioning utilizes cold water near shore to cool large acres of operations, business, malls, the same district cooling activity, which uses, again, cold water. So refrigerants are important in some areas, but where we can avoid them, then alternatives were recommended. And for example, the use of natural refrigerants, I already mentioned some of the hydrocarbons, which are natural refrigerants, with ammonia is a natural refrigerant that we use in Jamaica in ice making. So the support of this kind of option, but also passive cooling under alternatives is very important, because even right now, my air conditioner is not running. I have a fan that is using the air that's available, and my windows are open. So never mind if you see my curtain blowing, I am using passive cooling to keep me in a state that will allow me to function. Recommendation 6 spoke about the fiscal incentives. So how can the government give support to energy efficient cooling and climate friendly options, at least to get it started. Thereafter, a market that is strong and vibrant will take it forward. Education is important for persons to know what's available in the market, for the installers and the service persons to know, for the government to be aware. So that was also important as a recommendation. Recommendation 8 spoke about capacity development, which I mentioned earlier, looking at our universities, our training institution, our skills development institutions, ensuring that the installers and the service providers are au fait with what works, new refrigerants, what adjustments need to be made, and to deliver quality service. We have a number of policies and conventions that we agreed to. So the recommendation 9 would then seek to make sure that we are always harmonizing and optimizing the policies and plans and arrangements. Recommendation 10, we want to ensure that there was collaboration and reinforcement of the works that are done. And in the public sector procurement, recommendation 11, it's very, very important that the government, which is the largest single category of energy users, and also for refrigeration and cooling, then sets an example by ensuring that it utilizes green procurement principles each time that it has to do a procurement. So this was something that needed to be inserted in the cooling strategy. Funding and financial mechanisms, already mentioned cooling as a service. Loretta mentioned leasing, for example. Instead of purchasing and having capital costs, infrastructural costs for putting in cooling systems, you can pay for what you really want. You don't want a 10-ton system on your building. You want to be cool. So now you can just pay for cooling. And so there are mechanisms that will facilitate market transformation.
David, I'm concerned about the time to allow for some questions as well as Vivian's presentation. So could you please?
I'm going to close in 1 minute. So waste disposal is something that's important, because you can't simply vent the refrigerants, and I spoke about the cold chain earlier. So in closing, let me just say that Jamaica, by engaging in the Caribbean Cooling Initiative, has it been able to put together the 3 ambitions it has efficiency, cooling, climate change, and the ozone layer. The government is definitely committed to this. The cooling industry, the market, and consumers are already moving towards cooling and are very committed to continuing this path. And so the cooling strategy puts in the recommendations that would make this quite possible. We have already submitted the document to the government, and we await the finalization and adoption. So thank you very much for the time, and feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that very comprehensive presentation. We're now fortunate to have Mr. Vivian Blake, who's going to share a government perspective on this cooling strategy. And Vivian is a manager of the National Ozone Unit and is also a National Ozone Officer with the National Environment Agency of Jamaica. He's a graduate of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, with a first degree in chemistry and holds an MSc degree in environmental management from UWI. He was previously employed as a quality assurance analyst in the pharmaceutical industry in the United States and also in Jamaica, and he's been employed at NEPA since 2001. So he, like NEPA, is going to be celebrating their 20th anniversary throughout this year. He's also worked in watershed and water quality management and is married for 12 years to his better half, Bridget, who I've known almost as long as I've known him, if not longer. And they have two children, Savannah and Philip. So welcome, Vivian, and we're looking forward to your perspective on the national cooling strategy and how it fits with the government's overall plans. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, you don't mind if I go off screen during this presentation? I think I can move a bit faster that way.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So to begin, I'd just like to take this opportunity to convey my appreciation to UN Environment for organizing this timely forum and express solidarity with my fellow ozone officers who are wishing for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines a speedy recovery from the devastating effects of the recent volcanic eruption. And as you mentioned, Mr. Sweeney, congratulations to the team at NEPA as it commemorates today its 20th anniversary. Now, regarding the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, KCEP, since initiating sea cooling early 2018, progress has been made with the government of Jamaica, local industry, and civil society on the Caribbean Cooling Initiative, following the series of consultation meetings held in Kingston in June 2018, April 2019, and September 2019. The United for Efficiency U4E project team has been providing a range of technical assistance, assessment, development of a national cooling strategy, initiating a cooling as service financial mechanism, sharing insights on standards and labels for refrigerating appliances and air conditioners, and providing capacity building on product registration systems. U4E has also facilitated capacity building of trainers and standards and customs institutions regarding the air conditioning sector, the Jamaican stakeholders. In recognition of the national imperative for the adoption of sustainable cooling technologies consequent to climate change impacts, the National Environment and Planning Agency, as the implementing agency, affirmed its commitment in August 2020 to the Chief of the Energy and Climate Branch, UNEP, to continue working on the national cooling strategy such that it can be incorporated as appropriate into the nationally determined contribution to the climate agreement or updates thereof. Historically, one of our greatest milestones in this arena, Jamaica officially phased out CFCs 4 years ahead of the Montreal Protocol schedule in 2006. Since 2013, collaborating with the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and national technical experts whilst implementing our HPMP, which is our HCFC phase-out management plan. Very long word, we use a lot of acronyms as Mr. Sweeney indicated. to build the capacity of over 100 rack sector technicians to equip them with the knowledge and skills to transition to non-ODS, low GWP cooling technologies, including hydrocarbons and natural refrigerants. The solid and sound environmental protection regulatory foundation was strengthened with the passing of the Trade Order 2014, subsequent to the consolidation of older articles of legislation. Collaboration with UNDP in 2018 to implement enabling activities for the ratification of the Kigali Amendment was quite successful. The country achieved breakout codes thanks to the Jamaica Customs Agency for the pure and blended HFCs, prepared drafting instructions for the preparation of legislation known as the Trade in the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol Control of Trade in Controlled Substances, Interim Order 2019. A variety of public education and awareness enhancing material on the Kigali Amendment has also been disseminated. In the process, we are also in the process of HFC import data collection to our baseline, which will help us to establish a future quota and licensing system. A synergistic initiative we have at the moment is, at the request of the government of Jamaica, the UNDP is undertaking a diagnostic study to implement not-in-kind technologies such as district cooling, which was mentioned by Mr. Barrett. The latter is seen as a means of reducing the use of refrigerants with high global warming potentials, while promoting the use of more energy-efficient systems in the refrigeration air conditioning sector in Jamaica. The technical partner in this investigation is DevCo, consulting firm specializing in district energy based in Sweden, to assessing the potential of seawater to cool infrastructure. This year, we actually plan to reinforce best practices in the servicing sector to minimize emission potential and also to look at procurement of non-ODS, low GWP cooling technologies. Discussions are also underway to design a survey to determine the amount of spent refrigerants requiring destruction. World Ozone Day celebrations 2018, NEPA planted trees at schools to enhance cooling the ambient environment on school grounds and raise awareness of trees as important elements of carbon sequestration. Through the Compliance Assistance Program with UN Environment, we constantly engage the Jamaica Customs Agency and Ministry of Health and Wellness insofar as enhancing regulatory and control mechanisms to protect our borders from illegal imports damaging to the ozone layer and climate protection. This includes the current HCFC quota and licensing system for 15 refrigerant importers. Jamaica maintains an excellent compliance record for on-time reporting of the consumption of HCFCs to the Ozone Secretariat and the Multilateral Fund Secretariat. Collaboration with the Jamaica development of standards for the handling, transport, storage, and labeling of refrigerants. The strategic partnership with JARVA facilitated the development of the Code of Practice for the rack industry, which is a best practices guide for the sector, which, amongst other things, instructs technicians on how to safely manipulate hydrocarbon and natural refrigerant systems. The Bureau of Standards Jamaica also is spearheading the development of energy efficiency standards for cooling equipment, including labeling standards for same. And my last discussion point is one of pride. The region's first net zero energy building housed at the University of the West Indies Mona campus here in Kingston, Jamaica. This climate smart center hosts the Center for Advanced Research in Renewable Energy. This is the result of collaborative efforts between the Institute for Sustainable Development at UWI, the GEF, and the UNEP. It represents energy efficient architecture that employs the natural environment for cooling a building envelope and harnesses renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for that perspective. And I'd like to invite the other colleagues who presented, Loretto and David, maybe to to also put on their cameras. We can have some interaction. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but certainly the floor is available. It's a small group, so if you'd like to unmute your mic and ask a question, feel free to do so. I thought there were a couple interesting points which I wanted to highlight, or maybe delve a little deeper into. One has to do with the discussions that were going on at various times during the CCOOL process, where the suppliers were saying that it was much cheaper to bring in the less efficient air conditioners, for example, than to bring in the more efficient, which were in fact much more costly. And I'd like to get some perspectives on, you know, how the strategy might inform the industry and the consumers in terms of either short-term gain versus long-term pain, particularly with respect to the air conditioning industry. Anybody want to share their views? Maybe we can start with you, David. Where could you unmute, please?
Sorry about that. Right. So part of that comment is because as the market tries to bring in systems of higher efficiency, they find that there's a slight premium to doing that. And in some cases, they are importing from specific suppliers. Now, what we found in this whole experience was that areas like China, for example, is providing systems in such large volumes that they have been able to get the prices down. But not all of our suppliers in Jamaica necessarily use those sources. So it is believed that at some point in time, once our suppliers begin to access those markets where large volume, lower prices, and when the market in Jamaica, I can speak for Jamaica, when the market in Jamaica draws closer and closer to greener, more efficient systems, it will eventually balance itself out, because of course it's a matter of volume that sometimes changes that price.
Great, thanks. I'm seeing that I've provoked some thought from the participants, and I see Leslie Smith from Grenada would like to make a comment, and also Carrie Ann wants to know if the presentations will be available. We certainly can make them available. So go ahead, Leslie. The floor is open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sweeney, and I want to thank all of the colleagues who have made presentations. I thought they were very, very good presentations. I want to thank the organizers of this event. I thought it was very, very informative. My only regret is that many of my colleagues are not on this particular call or this meeting. I'm not sure what's the reason for that, but I see a lot of value in this exercise, and I thought they could have benefited as well. My colleagues Vivian, Loreto, I thought your presentations were excellent, but I want to highlight the recommendations made by Mr. Barrett. I think all of those recommendations are exactly what we need if we were to achieve sustainable cooling. A lot of the times we believe that cooling is about the equipment and the refrigerants, but there's a whole lot more to go if we want to achieve sustainable cooling. So from the policies, from the building infrastructure, the building envelope, the building codes, etc., the fiscal incentives. And I thought everybody should really look at those recommendations that you have made in implementation of national cooling action plans. With respect to Grenada, as was mentioned by, I think, Loreto, we have done quite a lot as well with our national cooling action plan. As a matter of fact, it's before the cabinet now for approval, and that we were able to do on the project referred to as the C4 project, Cool Contributions Fighting Climate Change, with support from the German government. And we have a very comprehensive strategy there for achieving that. I just want to quickly take up on the question that you raised towards the end in terms of the cost comparison between the environmentally friendly cooling technologies and those more conventional ones. We have been one of the first countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that have commercially available R290 air conditioners for sale. As a matter of fact, we've been distributing throughout the region. And I can tell you, for the unitary air conditioning systems, they actually sell cheaper than the HFC-based equipment. So an R290 air conditioner sells cheaper than an R410 air conditioner. And the beauty about it is that the R290 air conditioners achieve much more energy efficiency than the best R410A that's on the market. So it's a big sell here. There's a huge uptick of R290 air conditioners here. And it's all good as was mentioned, because of the low GWP and the zero ODP, these fit the bill perfectly in terms of a long-term permanent replacement for air conditioning, and might just be an option for others to consider as we move forward to sustainable cooling. So thank you all very much for the presentations, and I just wanted to make those comments there.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much,
Leslie. Vincent, if I could just add that part of the capacity development also includes knowing which refrigerants could potentially be a replacement for existing refrigerants. And so in some cases, consumers may not need to remove their air conditioner, but may have to have the right qualified supplier replace that refrigerant. But that can be a very specific activity.
Yeah, there's a whole another area that we also have to look at, and that is mindset. Mindset needs to be seriously changed, because when you speak to the average hotel or you speak to the average office or business, you know, and you ask them why they've chosen a particular air conditioning unit, it's always about price. It's only the very, very sort of educated individual or very well-informed individual, and they generally are from outside the region, who will tell you, oh no, I bought that one because I know my bill is going to be lower down the line. We had noted that there was a significant difference in the types of units that were being purchased by the villas, you know, other than the hotels, because the villas were nearly all foreign owned. And so the villa owners were purchasing air conditioning units, which were to the standards of the countries that they themselves came from, right? Where the local hoteliers were just buying, in a lot of cases, oftentimes buying what may be available. In some cases, they are purchasing from, as I said before, somewhere like Best Buy or somewhere like that in Miami, and they are buying whatever they see, but then they have to replace one. So when they go to replace it, they will replace with whatever is the cheapest that there is on the market, or whatever is available in the stores at the time. So we need to do a really serious campaign on, you know, the types of units that are the most efficient, and as Leslie says, that are using the low GWP and low ODS gases, but that are efficient and that are also, you know, they're going to be more cost effective in the long run. It's not just about you saving a couple of $100 on the air conditioner when you buy it. It's about saving money down the line when you look at your energy bill, because the energy bill, you know, we have really no control over. We only have control over our own usage. But if we are really serious about this, and if we are really serious about trying to get people to think differently, we've got a lot of work to do.
Thanks, Loretto. I see Bishnu has unmuted. I'm not sure if he wanted to join the discussion, but you certainly can. There are some possibilities to raise one's hand as well if persons would like to join, but the floor is yours, Vishnu. Go ahead.
Thanks. So looking for a place to raise my hand. Anyway, I joined Leslie. Excellent presentations. I'm quite pleased that I skipped something else to join this. But I have a specific question, and it's about the whole selling of cooling as a service. And I was wondering whether that has been presented to any end users, any hotels or large installations, and what their reaction is to that approach to acquiring their cooling services.
Can I contribute? So
Go ahead, David.
I should go ahead, Vincent?
Yes, go ahead, David.
Okay.
We're not hearing you, David. You're muted again.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, so in Jamaica, there has been, as it were, a collaboration between the Caribbean Basin Sustainable Energy Fund, CABEF, and CAC 2000 to develop cooling as a service for, they have identified large potential clients. And what would have prevented it at this point in time was, of course, the pandemic, which made it difficult for, technical assessments on site, and negotiations would have slowed down. But there's definite interest, and I know within the Caribbean, I don't want to call it country because I may miss it, but I know that there is one island that has actually sort of initiated cooling as a service. I'm also aware that I'll say the utility in Jamaica has looked at that as a possibility. So it's a dynamic situation. It's a viable situation because a lot of the financial options now are leaning that way. And if I would just mention, for example, the whole energy service company, ESCO development, is one opportunity that large entities have to utilize the service that they want, whether it is cooling or electricity, rather than putting down large sums of debt for capital expenditure.
Loretto, did you want to add to that?
No, I actually just wanted David to speak on it because I know that more has been done in Jamaica than and DR than had been in the other islands. But the information has been made available. It's a question now, as I said, of just getting more information to the to people who may be interested. But again, it's Jamaica and DR tend to use a lot more of the larger type equipment than we do in the Eastern Caribbean. So where it's probably more viable initially in those countries than it is with the Eastern Caribbean. But we are certainly looking at it, and we are certainly, offering it as a solution to some of those the larger buildings.
Okay, thank you, Loretto. Just one final observation from my side, and maybe Vivian would want to respond to this. He mentioned the Net Zero Energy Building Project in Jamaica, and I know that there was some government involvement in terms of some of the actual government buildings, and they were looking at cooling efficiency within the buildings as part of that project. And I'm wondering if you anticipate there's going to be any further uptake in terms of not only the equipment efficiency, but also in terms of some of the other infrastructure that can be put in place to improve efficiency, whether it is the design of the buildings or any other type of ventilation systems that could augment what we enjoy from the air conditioning in our building.
Okay. My hope is that yes, the work will continue to get us towards that ultimate goal. Of course, the discussions are ongoing in terms of what I'd like to refer to as green architecture, green roofs. I don't see many of those here, on a widespread basis, but certainly with features for rainwater harvesting, which is very commonplace in Jamaica. We've been doing that, especially in those parishes where we have limestone karst geology, and there's not much development for surface water catchment. The water disappears underground and reappears. So we depend a lot on rainwater harvesting, especially in parishes like Manchester, St. Elizabeth, etc. But my hope is that those discussions will continue to bear fruit in the end. I do anticipate that with the push by our government
Not sure if we lost Vivian. It seems like we did at an inopportune time, because I see a question from Marsha, as would never be able to push green architecture or district cooling, which is something that I think Vivian would have to answer. I'm seeing an indication that he may have gone offline, so perhaps we can note that question, and Marsha, if you'd like to send us a message, we can probably connect you with Vivian directly. Or David, you wanted to jump in? Go ahead.
You mentioned the district cooling, and just to say that I know that UNDP has been involved in discussions looking at the eastern end of Jamaica for district cooling opportunities. That's a live consultancy that I think ended about 2 months ago. And I know prior to that, CAF was also doing research in Jamaica to look at the western end, the hotel belt, for district cooling. So it's a very live situation, and we do have the depths of water for cold water. We have the proximity to shore to move, and we do have the load that would take on that amount of cooling. And so we do have a real opportunity for district cooling for Jamaica.
Thank you, David. I'm not seeing any other questions either in the chat or persons raising their hands. I probably should have indicated that there's a little icon with a smiley face. And if you click on that, you'll have the option to raise your hands. But we've gone over an hour. We were estimating it would be an hour and maybe just a little beyond that. We're not that strict for time in some other webinars, but I know it's during people's lunch hours and they have other things that they would have probably scheduled to do. So at this point, I'm going to close the webinar by thanking the three presenters, Loretto, Vivian, I'm not sure if he's back yet, and David, and of course the participants for being here. We haven't lost anybody since we started. It's been a lively discussion and thankfully interactive as well. We hope that the efforts made under the Sea Cool project will bear fruit not only in Jamaica but in other parts of the Caribbean, and that the efforts that are ongoing will continue. And we're actually very encouraged at UNEP because of the national ownership in many of the countries, which is important if we are to be successful and the efforts are to be sustainable. So thanks to all of you. Well, welcome back, Vivian.
Power outage. Speaking about energy,
Yeah.
we had an outage.
You see, we need to stop consuming so much and putting more load on the grid. But I was just wrapping up and saying thanks to all of you for your inputs and for your ongoing efforts as we try to move this cooling efficiency and an energy efficiency agenda forward more generally. And I was thanking the participants as well. And of course, I want to thank my team, Emma and others who were involved in getting this together. We will be having another webinar next month, and you can stay tuned. You should be on our mailing list since you've joined this call today, and we continue to keep you informed of other efforts that are ongoing in the environment field in the Caribbean. So thank you very much to everybody. Take care, keep safe. I don't want to say condolences, but certainly you have my best wishes for a quick recovery in Eastern Caribbean, if that's possible. Try not to breathe in too much of that volcanic ash, Loretto and others, and try to keep safe more generally. So thank you, everybody, and take care.
Thank you very much.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Thank
Ciao.
you.
Keep up the excellent work, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Same to you. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.